Well, we are very honored to have our own modern-day Wild Horse Annie here today in Ginger Kathrens, the Executive Director of the Cloud Foundation, who has helped to inform and enlighten millions of people through her work, through her organization, and through her heartfelt passion for our wild horses and burros. So we are beyond honored to have you here today. Ginger Kathrens.
Well, I'm blown away by being in the room with you all because I am not a slaughter specialist. I don't know the ins and outs of slaughter, and I'm kind of in a way happy that I don't, but I've been taking notes, so it's really an honor to be here with you. And to be here with Susan in this beautiful place and to have the opportunity to go see Nelson. Has everybody seen Nelson? Yeah. Nelson, the beautiful wild horse stallion that lives here, and we're going to look for a partner for him so that he doesn't have to be out in that beautiful paddock all by himself. I came to the world of horses somewhat late. I had a horse growing up on our farm in Ohio, northwestern Ohio, Bowling Green. And, but I had just one horse at a time, and so I never knew anything about horses. But somebody thought I did. His name was Marty Stauffer. He was the host of the popular television series Wild America for PBS. I don't know whether any of you remember the Wild America television series. Enjoy our Wild America. But I'd been working on the show for a while as a writer and an editor, and he saw a film that I had produced and largely shot called Spirits of the Rainforest. And in 1993, that film was honored as Best Documentary of the Year. And so all of a sudden I was an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, and so he was happy to ask me if maybe I would shoot a segment for him. And he said, I've always wanted to do a film about wild horses. Will you shoot it for me? And I thought, oh yeah, terrific. Oh boy. All horses do, as you all know, is stand around in a field and graze all day. That's all my horse did. So not only did I not know anything about horses, I had a preconceived notion that I did know something. And so I was in trouble. I was also a writer for the series, so I did this grandiose outline with conquistadors and Indians and history and culture. I loaded it up because, you know, I couldn't do what Wild America was famous for, which was behavior. Since they don't have any behavior of any interest, I'll load it up with history. And I did a location scouting trip. That's something that we filmmakers sometimes do. And I happened to go to the Pryor Mountains. If it wasn't for this horse, I would not be standing here, by the way. I went to the Pryor Mountains on a tip, and I went out at dawn, and I saw a black stallion eating snow at the base of a red butte as the sun was coming up over the Bighorn Mountains. And I filmed him, but as soon as I got the camera set up, pretty soon after that, he snorted, and then I saw behind him a group of other horses, and everybody ran away. That was not a very good snort, was it? RT can do it much better, I'm sure. But anyway, it was all butts and dust. And when they were running away, I did see a little newborn foal running alongside its mother. And so I thought, oh, that's that black stallion that people call Raven in the area. And that must be the newborn foal that they told me that I couldn't find. And as they were running away, I thought, well, maybe I'll come back here. Maybe I could get some pictures of him grazing in a field instead of running away from me, because that's all they did. And my whole trip throughout the West was just a series of butts and dust. I had been warned by my colleagues that they were going to be very, very difficult to film. More difficult than deer, more difficult than elk, and I really believed it. And I thought, well, beef up the historic reenactments. And that is what I planned on doing. And my first planned shoot, and let's hope the technology works on this, but my first planned shoot was a scheduled event called a roundup. Back then, in 1994, they called it like it was, which is a roundup. That was before some wordsmith in BLM decided to call it a gather. Words are important, aren't they? So I would, don't ever use the word in relationship to horses and refer to it in my presence, a roundup, a gather. It just sets my teeth on edge, and I think it's important for us not to buy in to their words. Let's call it what it is. It's a roundup. And so I went to a place called Antelope Valley in Nevada, and this first segment I'm going to show you, I hope, is the cut version that appeared in the film For Marty. So go ahead, Linda.
Far away from Raven's home, other wild horse bands are running in a race they will not win against an aerial enemy nature never prepared them to face. A roundup is in progress. A Judas horse is released just ahead of the fleeing wild horses. Their domestic cousin has been trained to head for the horse trap. The wild ones follow. All horses are highly social creatures. Today, their love of companionship will prove to be their undoing. Wild horses are also called mustangs, an English version of the Spanish word mesteños, meaning wild ones or strays. Because mustangs live mostly on government land, they're under the care of the Bureau of Land Management, known as the BLM. The BLM is in charge of managing wild horses and removing excess animals, bending to the will of cattle and sheep ranchers who want these lands exclusively for their livestock. Many of the older horses will be released within 24 hours, but most young animals will be trucked to Reno and put up for adoption as part of the BLM's Wild Horse and Burro Adoption Program. The terror of a roundup seems unthinkable on this peaceful late spring day in the Arrowhead Mountains. The Palomino mare has given birth to a striking orange colt.
Did that look like a gather to you? Yeah, no. Well, you know, I did a good job of filming this. I had it in focus. I had good composition. And I edited it far later after things changed. But at the time, I really didn't have a clue what I was filming. I was filming a bunch of horses being driven into a corral. But I did go back then 2 weeks later to the Prairie Mountains thinking maybe I could find that black stallion who had captivated me, and I thought maybe I could get some pictures of him. And I did go back there, and I went by myself, and I drove up the mountain, and as I was driving up, I saw a black stallion paralleling my car. And it was Raven and his family. And then later in the day, I shot the footage that you just saw on the tail end of the roundup sequence. And that was what happened to me when I went back there time and again. Raven would show up with his family, almost as if they were telling me to tell their story. And I had no concept of what I was doing. I didn't even know what a band was. I didn't know that the stallion had 2 basic jobs. He was there 365 days a year, and his job was to protect his family, and his job was to keep his family together. And Raven did that very well. He had 2 lead mares, so he was somewhat conflicted. And one of those mares was, who is that young woman? What I was going to say with this slide is that I was by myself. The camera weighed about 20 pounds, and the tripod was really a boat anchor. It weighed about 25 pounds. And whenever anything would happen from a behavioral standpoint, I was absolutely convinced it was the only time it was going to happen. And so I found myself running with a 20-pound camera and a 25-pound tripod to the water hole. Raven was coming to the water hole. It's the only time I'm ever going to see him come to the water hole and get a drink. I mean, I was really stupid. There was not even like a Wild Horses for Dummies book out there then. I mean, I was sure it. And when they'd come to the water hole, they didn't just drink. They pawed in the water, and they rolled in the water. And then they got out of the water, and then they played, and then they rolled in the sand. And then the little ones ran around some more. And I noticed that when Raven came, there were these other bands up around here. And I thought, aha, there's a hierarchy. He's more powerful. He gets to stay until he's done, and then somebody else will come down. And then somebody else did come down, and that would have been maybe the second most powerful band, and so forth. And there, you could draw a concentric circle around the water hole, and the most dominant bands would be within the center of the circle, and the most subordinate, and usually sometimes the smaller bands, would be way out in the outskirts. Sometimes they would come at night, even. So this was all like fascinating to me. And then I got to meet, well, I told you how conflicted that Raven was. He had 2 lead mares. This was one of them, Grumpy Gruya. Gruya is a color. It's a dun-factored horse with a dorsal stripe, all those primitive marks. And she didn't have a name, so I called her Grumpy Gruya because she was grumpy. And she was really a disciplinarian. With the foals. There were 3 foals in the band, 3 sons. Her son was a Gruya. Then the buckskin mare had the little colt I saw when I was there in March that ran away when he was a newborn with his mother. And then the Palomino mare had this really pretty orange foal that you saw in the footage just a minute ago. And Grumpy Gruya could create discipline by just staring at one of these foals. Nobody got much out of line. An ear back got serious. 2 ears was, uh-oh, watch out. And then the butt turn was the last warning you're going to get. But I want to tell you that the discipline was never a brutalizing. It wasn't physical. It was all just gestures, but it was consistent. We could learn something, I think, those of you who are parents, about that kind of consistent discipline that Grumpy was so famous for. What's next? Aha. And this is the little orange colt. I'll tell you in a minute why he's called the cover-up colt. So I learned all about well, I didn't learn all about it, but I started to learn about wild horse society. And it is so complex that, this is going to sound stupid, I thought it was very wolf-like. Because name me another hoofed animal in our hemisphere in which Dad is there 365 days a year. There aren't any. Only the wild horse has this kind of social structure. It is so critical. The family is everything to a wild horse. That's why these young bachelor stallions that are sometimes on the periphery that I talked about, they'll come crashing in there sometimes and try to start their own family. And that's really what the Cloud Series is about a young foal, I filmed from the day he was born, trying, even when he was little, to win mares. And have followed, it's the only chronicle of a wild horse from birth, an animal from birth in our hemisphere. So it's unique in that regard. This is a year before. So this is a year that Ginger knew nothing. And I still continue to learn, don't we all? We all have a lot to learn. But in the fall, after I'd spent this summer in heaven, I really did feel like I had been dropped in to the Garden of Eden. It's such a beautiful place. The Pryor Mountains, you can see the Absaroka Mountains of Yellowstone to the west, the Beartooth Mountains to the north, jaggedy, hence the name Beartooth. The Bighorn Mountains are across, across the Bighorn Canyon. And you're on top of this mountain in the summertime with the lupin flowers that you saw in the previous slide. And you saw in John's slide, those were Pryor Mustangs in the lupin. It's just heavenly. It's spiritually powerful, and I think that's something to be said for being with wild horses. There's a spiritual power to this place, and there's a spirituality about them. I had been to this roundup in Nevada, and so when I learned that there was going to be a roundup, here, I was interested still in. It hadn't really hit me that the Nevada roundup was such a tragedy until after I realized what they'd done. When the coutures, and it was those people with the strange name who now made millions and millions of dollars off of doing this violent event called a roundup. I didn't realize at the time that how violent and shattering that was of the society. They run them all in. Males go on the left when they were processing them. Mares on the right. The foals are separated. It's just a cacophony of crying, of calling. And but at the time when I filmed in June of 1994, like I said, I was just trying to keep it in focus and composition and so forth. But Raven opened the door. I had this wacky thing I would do. I would wave at them because they were so skittish. I tried to hide, and then they became even more skittish because what was I then?
Mountain lion.
Exactly. Whoever said mountain lion is specifically correct. I was a predator, and so I had to adapt my behavior and become benign. So if I walk out right in the open, not very close, but right in the open, and I wave and I sit down and I'm still, then I became in time to Raven as benign as a bush or a rock in his environment, and he ignored me. And remember I said how powerful he was. Then the other horses, you know, you have horses. One spooks, the other one spooks. One's real good and solid and quiet. You want that one with you because it'll kind of keep the others quiet. Well, Raven was looked upon by the other horses, and I think they said in their own way, well, she didn't eat them. Maybe it's okay. And so it was Raven who led me down the path that I'm on now. They were going to do a Wrangler, or they did do a Wrangler roundup in September. They were going to use Wyoming and Arizona cowboys, and the cowboys were going to come chase the horses down off the mountain. And that was supposed to start in September 19th. So I asked the BLM, and that's the Bureau of Land Management, that is largely in charge of managing wild horses on our public lands, although Forest Service is also a part of it. I went to BLM and I said, I'm studying this band. I'm filming them for a Wild America television series. I didn't tell them that I dumped a lot of the Indian history and culture because I was onto something here. I knew that I was filming something that had not been done before, and that is the chronicle of a real wild horse family. And BLM said, oh, well, we won't round them up. And I said, well, thank you very much. And then 2 days before the roundup was supposed to start, I arrived, and I went out to the corrals at the base of the mountain where the horses would be brought in, and Raven's band was in the corral. And I peeked through the slats of the wooden fence, and the strawberry roan colt was missing. The orange colt had become a strawberry roan, and he was not there. And I said, well, where's that colt? There's a colt missing. And they said, oh, there's a colt missing. Well, he ran away from his mother. And I was so green. I knew there was something wrong with that, but I was so green, I didn't realize that he would never have run away from his mother. And then they said, well, we'll let her out to search for her foal. And I said, well, can't you let the whole band out? You have no intention of keeping them. There were 3 mares, a stallion, and 3 foals. Nobody in that group was to be removed for a roundup or for adoption. And they said, no, but we'll let the Palomino mare out. I said, can I film her? And they said, oh yeah, sure. And they were, just as nice as they can be. Well, I had gotten acquainted with the range tech with BLM. His name is Tom Voss. He's a wonderful guy and a horseman. And he said, don't leave the corrals. They're going to start processing the horses. And I said, well, I already saw that. I filmed it in Nevada, and they did the freeze branding and the shots and blah, blah, blah. He said, they're more likely to be more careful if you're here. I said, yeah, but Tom, I've got to go. They've let her out. I've got to go find the baby. So I didn't know that what they were going to do was nothing at all what I had seen in Nevada. And this is what they did.
Oh, there it is.
There we go. Oh boy.
Okay, well,
Let's go back.
we'll go back anyway.
Can we go back with your clicker? Oh, it's a double click.
There we go, there we go. Yay.
Once the BLM cowboys do return, the crew leaves again to search for the missing strawberry roan colt. Within the hour, the cowboys begin heading and heeling, a roping technique identical to these scenes filmed in years past with the same government wranglers. A Wild West show for the BLM becomes a nightmare for the wild horses. Flash's chestnut mare is torn apart, shot, then dumped within 100 feet of the corrals.
At least 6 horses died in this roundup, including the strawberry roan foal and Grumpy Gray's son. So 2 of the 3 foals in Raven's band were killed, and this was, of course, a horrendous tragedy for the horses, and I thought I was going insane. And now I still feel like I'm going insane, so let me see where I am. Okay, now we're going to flash forward to a piece that I edited recently. I went to central Utah for a roundup in the Swayze Mountains. The roundup company again was Couture, and it was to start the day after I got there, and there'd been like a foot of snow that had fallen, and I cut this piece because I wanted you all to get a sense of what it's like today to be at a roundup. Now, In Utah, they did give us a fairly good vantage point where we could kind of see what was going on. But literally, and I'm not kidding you, sometimes our vantage points are behind rocks and trees. When our board member Lisa Friday went to a roundup in Utah, her vantage point was 3 miles away. So they try to keep us from documenting what's going on because we shed too much light on the problem of helicopter roundups. So let's see, hopefully this will play. 16 inches of snow blankets Utah's Swayze Mountain Wild Horse Range 2 days before a roundup is to begin. Roads drift closed, and accessing the range proves impossible until snowplows clear the way. Once open, we drive over the Swayze foothills to the western slope of the range. Just before sunset, we find a sheep herder bringing in a flock of 600 sheep, a portion of the nearly 5,000 sheep permitted in the horse range. Despite the snow and cold, the next morning the roundup is still a go. I have a statement to make. You know, I think we want to go on record as saying that we don't think that this roundup ought to start today. We came out yesterday. The only reason we're here is that the snowplows cleared the drifts so that we could get here. Most of the horses are up high, so they'll have to come down off a steep terrain. It could be slick, could be icy. Temperatures are cold, as you pointed out. Too cold, certainly, for Dr. Grandin's standards, at least right now, of 20 degrees or higher. Peak foaling season here is, I believe, April 15th, which that means some to be foaling within several weeks. We were told that it was contractors' availability for why this is going to be rounded up for the first time in winter. We represent tens of thousands of people who would not want this to proceed in these conditions. 2 choppers working together drive multiple family bands of Mustangs toward the trap. The contractor receives $350 for each Mustang they capture. This run of at least 4 family bands will net them over $10,000. Wild horses simply trying to survive winter panic when forced into the crowded alleyway. Watch the right side of the frame and the foal that is upended and trampled. A BLM official refuses to acknowledge that the cloud of steam rising from the Mustangs is the result of their sweaty bodies.
They're sweating pretty hard.
Well, they're steamed out. I'm not sure how much they're sweating.
Oh.
The temperature gauge on our truck reads 16 degrees. The water in my water bottle freezes inside my pack as a mare is separated from her frantic foal. At the same time, the BLM continuously tweets that the temperature is 32 degrees. The cycle repeats itself. In all, the experienced crew will receive at least $90,000 for less than 1 week's work. Farther out, another band struggles through the crusty snow. Their Palomino band stallion has dropped back. His dun mare and her paint foal are having trouble keeping up. It's the stallion's job to protect the family and to keep them together. The Palomino is gamely trying to do both. With the help of what may be his lead mare, the family is reunited, but the end is near. Sensing the danger ahead, the stallion tries to reach the front of the group. only to be outdistanced by his buckskin mare. Once caught, the stallion is removed, and the separation of the mares and their foals begins. The unique social structure of wild horses, in which the stallion plays a key role 365 days a year, is ignored as BLM shatters the family unit. The first horses are driven in from the north. The same official who downplayed the relationship between steam and sweating informs us that the runs are no more than 5 miles. We have no way to verify this, as BLM allows no cameras on the helicopters, nor do they report GPS coordinates. Mustangs are not the only species terrorized by the helicopters. A large group of pronghorn race by, a scene similar to our experiences at Wyoming roundups. BLM refers to Day 2 as a mop-up operation. This second small family group concludes the drive trapping in the area. The colorful medicine hat stallion is loaded with another stallion and his mares. Then they are hauled to a temporary holding facility nearby. At temporary holding, I am only able to get a clear view of the horses by standing atop a snowdrift. Foals are put together in a pen. Stallions are sorted into an all-male corral. Animals to be released back to their home are identified, and mares to go back out are given the infertility drug PZP-22. The rest, every single young animal and some older animals, are transported to the short-term holding facility in Delta. Young animals are offered for adoption, but most will not find homes and will live in short-term facilities for years at an average cost of $5.50 per day. It may be years before these weanlings go to long-term facilities, which cost an average of $1.35 a day. Over the course of its likely long life, each unadopted foal could cost taxpayers over $16,500. The Wild Horse and Burro program is clearly a fiscal train wreck and a humane disaster. Alternatives exist to allow wild horses to remain on the range with their families. Bait trapping, coupled with remotely delivered fertility control, as well as predator protection, could end massive removals. Returning captive wild horses to zeroed-out herd areas would help relieve the burden of feeding the 50,000 animals in holding. The contractor moves the trap farther north. Wranglers shovel a path in the deep snow, hoping this will help the wild horses run the last few steep yards into the capture corral. We're witnessing the removal of some of the last Mustangs remaining on western ranges. Ranges set aside principally for their use. In reality, however, Swayze Mustangs are allotted only 13% of the forage, while privately owned livestock gets 87%. The Bay-Roan stallion is unusual for Swayze, and his 2 dun mares are robust, as is his little son. The wranglers separate the adults from the colt, putting him in an adjacent pen. The colt searches unsuccessfully for a way to join his family. He quiets a bit when he realizes they're nearby. The helicopter has more horses on the run. The colt can hear the ominous noise growing louder. Our vantage point is much closer than the days before, and it's a mixed blessing. From here we can see the Mustangs struggling, taking their final strides before their freedom is swept away. The well-timed release of the Judas horse ensures they will continue into the track. From here, we can sense their confusion. From here, we can see the terror in their eyes. It's hard for me to watch. While filming the sorting of the horses, I didn't notice that the bay colt's family had been loaded into the front of a trailer. Instead of letting him ride in the back compartment, adults are loaded there. He calls for his mother, and she answers as the trailer drives away. The colt's attempts to escape and his repeated calls still haunt me. Any number of people walk by. Didn't they notice his distress? Or was this just business as usual? An hour passes and more horses are loaded into a trailer. The bay colt is loaded with a cremello foal, but that does not quiet him. They drive off, and he still calls for his mother. The inhumane helicopter stampedes and the massive taxpayer-funded removal and warehousing of our American Mustangs has to stop. From far away, I can hear him calling. I will never forget his voice. Well, I really couldn't forget his voice. I pick him up on May 14th. He doesn't have a name, so maybe you can give me some suggestions. I wanted to adopt him because I felt so sorry for him, and I knew that a plain bay had no hope of getting adopted because the Swayze horses are, you know, colorful cremellos and pintos and palominos. What hope does a plain little bay have of getting a home? But I talked to BLM the other day, and they said, he's turning gray. And of course, what they meant by that is he's roaning out like his father. His father was a bay roan, and so he's probably going to be this stunner just like the rest of my horses. But in any case, I think that gives you kind of a good profile of what without being there, because most of you probably have never been to a roundup, what it's like to be at one, and how vulnerable these animals are. When Stephanie talked about the numbers of horses that are in both short and long-term holding in Oklahoma, because they have a large short-term holding facility, that's where these young horses will go, is to short-term. Usually it's dirt paddocks, pens, sometimes mud. Rarely do they have any cover, not any windbreaks. And then there's the long-term holding pastures in Oklahoma and Kansas. There also is a new one in Montana. So if we don't want to have wild horses slaughtered, what do we do? Well, there's two things that we can do. One, to relieve the fiscal heavy burden of the taxpayer, and of course this would be an issue that is the issue to push with certain committees and so forth, is that this is throwing good money after bad. I mean, we're spending over $120,000 a day to feed the Mustangs they have removed from public lands and are warehousing in short and long-term facilities. So if we want to relieve that short-term burden, and those were what I was talking about with the $5.75 a day, wild horses have lost over 20 million acres of land since the Wild Horse and Burro Act was passed. When I met with Bob Abbey 2 years ago, he indicated that there was at least 5 to 7 million acres available for repatriation. And I mean, it does not take a rocket scientist to say, let those short-term holding horses go back to the ranges that have been zeroed out. It's an easy solution, and one that we need to really push forward with. And then with the rest of the horses, what do? Well, if we don't want them to go to slaughter, we don't bring them in from the range. We leave them on the range with their families. How do we do that? On the range, adaptive management, and that means adaptive management, and this word adaptive management is in the BLM's handbooks. I don't know whether they've ever read their handbooks, but adaptive means flexible. It means not just doing the same thing every day, day after day. It's not working, so their conclusion is let's just keep doing what we're doing. Well, you know what they're going to do eventually, gang. You know what they're going to do. They've loaded this Wild Horse and Burro Advisory Board with pro-slaughter people. And at some point they're going to say, what can we do? I mean, there's wild horses coming out of our ears, the taxpayer's paying all this money, we don't have any money to do anything else, we'll just dispose of them. And of course that is what they planned in 2008. And I'll go through that in just a minute. But we keep them on the range. And the goal of adaptive management is that mortality equals reproduction. In other words, the goal is no removals. And this will work, I think. I met with BLM just a month ago, and this is BLM in Billings. Consider that we have a major lawsuit against BLM in Billings. And still, we were able to sit down and talk to them as peers, one-on-one, not as aggressors, but as people who just came to talk to you. In fact, they invited us to come and talk. They said, when are you going to come in and talk to us? And when we met with them, we said, is a goal no removals? And they said, that would be ideal. Okay, how do we get there? Well, PZP is being used. It's a 1-year reversible infertility drug, and it's being used on the priors, but it's being used only with certain animals. It's only being used with just the old mares and some of the 2- and 3-year-olds. And so you have this big breeding age population in the middle that could still be popping out at as many as 20 or more foals this year in the Prairie Mountains. The population's only about 150 animals. So when you have this kind of a foal crop, then you're going to have what? A removal. Now in the priors, they did do bait trapping to their, and they did it well. And we were something that's important to do is when these people that maybe you don't even really necessarily like do good things, do something right, tell them. You did it well. And I documented that too. I have that on film of Jared Bybee doing bait trapping in the priors. And he is a good guy with that. He really knows what he's doing. So when we sat down with Jared and he said, yeah, that would be ideal as if we didn't have to remove horses. We said that we need to use PZP more aggressively. We need to give it at least 1 year to every female. Does that mean we'll have no foals? Never will have no foals because the drug isn't 100% effective. Just like what some of our scientists have said, we all react differently to drugs. And in this case, it can be a 90% effective, though it is a fairly effective drug. And Jared listened and everything, and we left our meeting and we went on our merry way. And a couple weeks later, Jay Kirkpatrick called me, who created PZP, and he said, Have you seen the posting that the BLM has put out? They had posted a scoping letter. And in that scoping letter, they're asking for public opinion on just what we were talking about. And they said, at the recommendation of the Cloud Foundation, we are exploring using more PZP on more of the mares on the mountain. Knock me over with a feather. I have had a very acrimonious relationship with the BLM in Billings. So even our worst combatants can, we can work together if we're really approach it in the right way, like Vickery was saying, as colleagues and as friendly people, not in-your-face, aggressive. So the goal is mortality equals reproduction. Those of you who know me know how much I hate giving drugs to wild horses. But I'm dealing with real-world stuff here. How do we prevent them from being removed? And we talked about bait trapping. This is bait trapping in the Priors. You can see how upset these horses are. Two foals are grooming each other in Jackson's band, and the bait trap is behind there. And they just sit and wait for him to come to the food. And then they close the gate, and they do the separation. Well, with bait trapping and PZP, application, what you can do is if you can't walk a horse down, if you can't walk with them like we can walk with the Prior horses because they're very used to people, as Terry knows, if you can't do that, then you entice them with goodies into traps, and then you can dart them in the trap. We did this with our mares that we managed, two family bands that we rescued from the Prior Mountains, and you can just dart them in the trap. It took 5 minutes to do our 5 mares. It's pretty fast. But where you can walk around with them, then you don't have to do that at all. You can do field darting. That's done in the Prior Mountains, field darting. It's and I'm a volunteer now for the BLM. I took the course. I'm not going to actually shoot the gun, but I can identify the ones that need to be done. And so we'll be doing that in a few weeks with my friend Effie Orser, who's military, who actually is good at shooting a gun. And so again, we can volunteer, amazing. The ideal thing that we're shooting for, no pun intended, is we're after natural management. I've campaigned for this ever since I met Raven and realized how important family is to these animals. And so we have to be protecting the predators, but the fact of the matter is that Wyoming and Montana, Fish and Game, are trying to increase the number of mountain lion permits. But we're still working to try to say, BLM, you have to help us. You have to go meet with Fish and Game. Well, one step at a time, So we're hoping that maybe we can spur BLM on to say, hey, the Prior Mountains had no management for 4 or 5 years running. Why? Mountain lion predation. Mortality and reproduction over a 4-year or 5-year period, 2001 through 2005, was 0. I mean, that didn't mean that foals didn't survive 1 year and none the next. There was a year when only 1 foal survived. So, but it averaged at 0 population growth. Well, if you have adaptive management, you allow for that flexibility. If we have a very harsh winter in the Prior Mountains, would I say dart every mare? Well, no, not if we had 20 or 30 horses that died from winter kill, or we had, again, intense predation. You pull back on the drug is reversible. So that's what I mean by adaptive, flexible management, and I think that's what we need to be encouraging BLM to do. And then there's something that's much more esoteric called reserve design, and it's a wonderful idea about it that has all the components within it that a wild horse would need, including predators, including natural barriers. This is a picture of the Bighorn Canyon. This is the wild horse range over on this side, and on that side is not. and it's an impenetrable boundary. I think it's a fabulous idea to have no livestock. There are no livestock in the Pryors, but the Pryors needs to be larger. That's what our lawsuit's about. It's making the range bigger so that there can be more horses there. But reserve design is a wonderful concept that Craig Downer talks a lot about. He's on our board. And I think it could work in the Pryor Mountains if we could get the range expanded. So that's something we're also working on. Okay, slaughter. Back to the BLM, and I'm going to go through this real quickly because I know how drastically behind schedule we are.
Go to 12:30 and we'll break for lunch.
Okay.
We have to do it that way. Yeah.
Okay. Back in 2008, it was revealed that BLM had started having meetings in July of 2008, and this is why slaughter is so potentially imminent, slaughter or disposal. And this committee met and they talked about ways to get rid of wild horses. And they talked about hiding it from public review. They talked about trying to avoid congressional scrutiny. They talked about how they would kill the horses with gunshots, barbiturates, how they could dispose of the bodies in pits. Would they have to avoid Clean Water Act standards? They would have to have additional psychological counseling for their employees who are putting down healthy wild horses. And they admitted that that some horses will go to slaughter. So they very well knew this. This only came to light because of a FOIA that Pat Haight with the Conquistador program, Pat passed away not too long ago, bless her soul, FOIA'd for the information. She FOIA'd for anything that had the word slaughter or disposal in it, and she got over 800 pages of documents. So this is on. This is still on the radar. Now we have this BLM advisory board that I think it's about split 50-50 maybe right now, pro-slaughter, anti-slaughter. I don't think it would need more than a couple more appointments. But do we have some bright hope on the horizon? Hopefully. Sally Jewell appears to be a person who sincerely loves the outdoors and the experience of being in the outdoors. And I don't think she brings with her the baggage that Secretary Salazar brought with him. He's from Southern Colorado. He lives very near Tom Davis, who was the fellow, as you may remember, sold over 1,700 Mustangs to two small border towns in Texas, and then says he doesn't know what happened to him after that. Ha ha. Sally Jewell, I think if the rank and file and the upper echelons of BLM don't get to her and don't brainwash her, and we can communicate with her in some way, I'm writing her a letter to ask her if she could come with me to the Pryor Mountains, because it is a life-changing experience. All wild horse herds are beautiful and all worthy of protection, but when you stand in a beautiful place like the top of the Pryor Mountains, it is life-changing. And I'm not just saying that. So many people that have been there that didn't even know me will just be talking and they'll say, this is the best day of my life. So I'm hopeful, and we're doing everything we can. Vickery, you and I need to talk more. I really appreciated all your presentations. It's all fantastic. Thank you so much, and if you have questions, I'll entertain them. Thanks.